Okay. And Sam, you are?
I'm the IT director.
IT director. Okay, very good.
He's everything.
Yes, we rely on our IT folks.
You just call him
Yes.
the wizard.
There you go. That works too. Like that. Well, thank you for that. I just wanted to have an idea. I knew you were in leadership, but I just wanted to know exactly. Thank you. And so Fairfax. So how long ago did you live in Virginia?
Oh, gosh, I moved here when I was 14.
Okay, so it's been a while.
We're live now.
Wonderful. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. I can't see everybody in the room, but thank you for taking the time to join us today. It really means a lot that you're sacrificing some time to get to know Dr. Gonzalez and hear her response to the questions that you formulated. You don't know me, and I know that I'm not the person that you guys want to see, but my name is Molly Swarthoff. I'm the Senior Vice President with Rain Associates, who's helping lead the search for your next superintendent. So I'll be facilitating the questions as we go through for the next 45 minutes. I do want to start off and give Dr. Gonzalez about 2 to 3 minutes just to give a quick snapshot of who she is and her background, and then we'll dive right into those questions.
Okay, very good. Well, again, thank you for having me here today. I'm excited to be here. I had an opportunity yesterday to visit with 2 of my most special reasons of wanting to move into the area. My grandchildren are right down in West Jordan. So, and I have a couple of children who live in the Salt Lake Valley area. So thank you for that. And also thank you for the opportunity to be here to speak with you today. As you saw in my bio or the press release, you know on my schooling background and that I am from Virginia, but I wanted to give you a little level of more specificity that I've worked in diverse areas, except for my current position now, it's not quite as diverse, but I worked at majority minority schools, and I was able to implement a lot of initiatives to be able to help close the achievement gap and increase achievement success, and also graduate more students. Especially when I was in Chesterfield County, I got to work there after starting my career, first of all, in Rockingham County for 5 years as a teacher. I did another 9 in Meadowbrook High School, which was my alma mater, which was really interesting to be able to give back. But also work a lot with L populations and majority minority school settings and being able to address their needs, which are quite different from other makeups of buildings. And so I had 14 years in the classroom and now 14 years in leadership roles. After transitioning out of the classroom, I was a school improvement coach, which really put me on the track of studying data and really making that my focus. And then as I went into more formalized education experiences, I was a dean of students at a technical center. So I have the career and technical education background as well, and really appreciate what that brings to the table. And then I also served 3 years at alternative high school as an assistant principal. So I've worked with our most struggling students who needed help to find their why graduate, why stay at the track. And so we did a lot of programs there as well to get them successful and to get us accredited again with our graduation rate. And after that, I was able to transition then into a central office role. One opened up that I was interested in with looking at data and accountability and assessments. And so I did that for the larger division in Williamsburg, where I trained other people. Now they were starting to model with school improvement coaching. So then I helped in the Williamsburg area train the school improvement coaches only at the high school at that point, at that level. But I worked with all the schools, studying their data and helping them interpret it and really helped to grow their data literacy. And then I moved on to Charles City, which, yes, it's smaller, but it was still a majority minority school division. And the beauty of being in a smaller division, you get to do everybody's job. So if anything, I feel like that was a great preparation for my superintendency I'm in now, because I truly had done everything and had a close relationship to all the moving parts and able to move and work on some projects there. So all those experiences before I moved into the superintendency in Page, I feel like were precursors and prepping me to be able to take on the many responsibilities of a superintendent. And currently I'm in Page County. I'm in my 3rd year there, and it's not as diverse, and my children have all left home now. And so after the pandemic, you kind of realize how lonely it can be up there in Page. And so I decided then to start looking for either opportunities closer in the Richmond area with one half of my children to live there, and the other half is here in the Salt Lake area. And then so when I saw the diverse and inclusive community that was in Salt Lake, I knew that was my vibe. I love rural education, but my vibe is definitely more suburban and urban districts. And so I just visited one of your schools this morning, and that's what I love. I love the diversity, and I love seeing that, being a part of that. So thank you for the invitation to be out here with you today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez. That was great. So we'll dive right into questions. If you'd like me to repeat one, just let me know. But we'll go ahead and just get started. What has the pandemic taught you about educational leadership? What was your biggest challenge and what was the biggest opportunity? How have those things changed your vision / philosophy as a leader?
Wow, the pandemic. Well, definitely no one has lived through that before. And so what I tell my staff is we all get to be new teachers together again, and we all get to be new school administrators again, because no one had ever done this before. And it's basically like building the plane while you're flying it. So it's really taught me about situational leadership. It's also taught me a lot about, again, I'm a big believer in servant leadership. That's really my mantra as a leader, is servant leadership, and what can we do to help you? And so with the pandemic, you really had to consider the safety of your students and your schools and your staff, and play it off in the community and their needs, and really do that balancing act and trying to validate people's feelings and concerns, but not let it get political or based on personal opinions or preferences or experiences, and trying to do the best for the whole. So I feel like that our biggest challenge, or the biggest challenge, was really allowing and figuring out the best model, first of all, to keep everyone safe and to keep the educational continuum going. But also the biggest challenge really came down to who had accessibility, who didn't, who had the skills and who didn't. How do you make it one model or two models fit everyone's needs and keeping that balance going? The biggest opportunity was turning education on its head. While where I'm at now, they're a little slower to change, and this kind of just kicked it in full gear. Whether we liked it or not, we all had to adapt to being able to teach remotely. And so we really had to use that. We didn't even have a learning management system in place yet. And so it was like you had to get one of those in place. You had to get the training. You had to get everyone up to speed. You had to communicate with your families. So while it was a great opportunity to be able to teach differently and use technology, it also became our biggest challenge, because you had to do it, and kind of was like, baptism by fire, right? Everybody just has to jump in the hot water together. And so how has my vision and philosophy changed with this is, I would say that I don't know that it changed so much, because I always espouse the vision that all students are learners and they all need to learn a different way. What this did do is prove, though, that we can do it differently, and it doesn't all have to be the same. And so when people ask about, like, what's it going to be? When are we ever going to go back to normal? I'm telling my families now, it might not ever be normal like we've had it before. How can it? Because we've experienced too much. We've moved ahead in too many ways. We need to take a step back and say, what worked well, what didn't work well, and be okay with that, and go, but what worked well, what can we take forward? Because there are some children who are excelling in this model, the remote and the hybrid models. There are some who are not. So what do we need to do for them as we go forward, and what do we need to continue? So I feel like in those areas, it's really changed a lot. If I look at another thing I would change, is that I don't know that I'd give them quite as many opportunities. Unfortunately, the pandemic and the different models that you have to offer have allowed some students to become too marginalized. They've allowed themselves to become marginalized. They've allowed themselves to become invisible. And so you do the porch visits, you go out and you meet them, and you're struggling to get them back in. And so it's very hard, especially when you look at the spring, when we had certain waivers and kids were going to move forward, and now trying to communicate the difference, that those waivers, not all those exceptions are in place. We still have to get to the finish line, even in this model. And so how do you empower your students and empower your staff and work together amidst all the fears of the pandemic and still get the job done? But I think not having quite as many choices, or at least having a little bit more criteria in place, that you have to have accessibility, you have to, be meeting a certain benchmarks to be able to still have that choice. And then when you allow them when you ask them that they have to come back, you still need to be respectful of their fears, perhaps put them in another room, another setting, but with a little bit more oversight so they can be successful. Because at the end of the day, it's about student achievement. And sometimes they don't know what's best for them, so we have to help them figure that out and really compromise. So again, the biggest challenges was all the adaptation, but it was also the biggest opportunity. We got to explore, we got to try new things. But again, the biggest takeaway now has to be the post conversations. What works, what doesn't work, and how do we move forward, and what does that look like?
Thank you. Question number 2. Tell us about your path to leadership. How will you use your position to foster growth in current and future leaders in our district? How do you plan to identify and develop talent within the district?
All right, so my path to leadership, really, to be totally honest, when I first started teaching, I just thought I was going to just be a teacher forever. I absolutely love teaching. I really purposely chose to take my time to be a teacher for a long time. I know there are some that do it for a short time and move into leadership, but I enjoyed it so much. I really didn't think I was going to go any further. I just enjoyed doing it. I know in my path to that, it was having these experiences and opportunities within the division level. And to that, I really have to thank Rockingham and Chesterfield counties for affording teachers those opportunities to grow. And I think that's what's important. I've always tried as a leader is to promote our own and grow our own. I know I try to do that right now in Page County is to grow our own and promote them. But it's also about having the opportunities to work on curriculum, to be on division-wide teams, to help be the problem solvers, to have a voice at the table. But it also is about being willing to sit at the table. I know that there's opportunities, I always say this, you can't complain if you have the invitation to come to the table. You kind of lose your right to complain, because if you're being invited to have the process, and then you need to be actively a part of that process, because if you want to affect change and impact student lives, you need to do that. So when I was moving along, when I was first in Rockingham, I was asked to be the department chair, and I turned it down. I didn't realize how you shouldn't do that, but I didn't, because I was just so focused on teaching and starting the AP program there. Then when I moved into Chesterfield, I was tapped to be the department chair again there. And so I said, okay, I'll do it. And so it was, people saw things in me, and it was because of other people saying, hey, Wendy, have you thought about going into administration? Have you thought about things? So I've always tried to return that favor. I always try to encourage people. I actually, in one of my divisions, I had to encourage someone to apply to be the principal. They didn't think they were ready. And I was trying to build them up and say, you know how to do this, that, and the other. Let me show you how you can do this, and build their confidence up so that they could feel like they were ready for the next step. And they did. And thankfully we were able to get that person promoted. But it's also about giving people responsibilities and inviting people to the table. One of my strongest leadership attributes, I believe, is collaboration. I like to have a meeting where everybody who's a stakeholder needs to be at the table. Why have multiple meetings? Because you didn't have everybody at the table. And to get that input and get that say. Now, it might be that we might still disagree at the end of the day, and because it's more about consensus, is we're not all going to agree, but it's about having that lens and that insight and having people be able to offer that to you, because each of us are limited in our own experiences, right? So the more people you can have to lend their perspectives, the better off that we'll be. And so as I did that, that's when I got tapped in to move into administration and then school improvement coaching and go after my master's. And then I had a professor who said, why don't you go after your doctorate? So it's always been someone there to help push me along. And so I always try to do that for the people. So I would want to do that here and make sure that we have that pipeline, have strong teacher leaders, have experiences, invite people to be on committees and expose them to the thinking, because this is the thing I always say. We've all been teachers before, but they all haven't been administrators, or we've been administrators, but you haven't been central office. And I always tell people, I said, it's one thing to look at the chair. It's another thing to sit in the chair. But how do you expose them to those experiences? And they're not going to grow if you don't give them that exposure. So I think that's vital to have that piece in place.
Great. Question number 3. Despite having a very supportive policy in place, LGBTQ and other minoritized students regularly report experience hostile school environments in SLCSD. What steps would you take to ensure that all students, families, and staff in the school district experience a supportive, inclusive school environment?
All right, so first of all, let me just say this about diversity. That diversity isn't about just knowing we're different. It's about celebrating and embracing our uniqueness. And I think that's what we have to look at when we look at our marginalized, our minority populations, is what can we take away from that to help grow them, help them find their voice. That's really what it comes down to. Michelle Obama said something about that one time, about finding your voice and growing and being heard. That's our role as educators, is to help our students and our families find their voice so that they can be advocates for themselves and for others. But it's also about knowing when to step back and listen and learn from others. Again, we are limited by our own lens of experiences. And so how then else are we going to learn from each other if we don't take a step back to listen and to be heard? But part of that is, again, like I was just saying, inviting them to the table of that conversation. And sometimes you have to push them a little bit more. There are some communities where they're not vocal like that by nature. They don't go out of their ways to do that. So you have to make it more comfortable and open for them where they realize that they can be a part of the process. And it's also about extending kindness, just human kindness one to another. I know when I was in the alternative school, it was about, we had some children who had some social emotional issues and traumatized events that had happened to them. So it was teaching them compassion for one for another and not to judge so quickly and to show that love to them. And I know for some of our children for whom they present themselves in a different manner that might not be accepting to everyone, that you have to still empower them, that they're still special, they're still of value, they still have worth, and to help them navigate that path and how they can stand up stronger. Because at the end of the day, it still goes back, how do we help our children become the best version of themselves as they know it to be at that time? And then to help us as a staff. One of the biggest ways to do that, again, when I was at the alternative school, is cultural competency and proficiency of our staff. I had a staff member one time get so mad when they were disciplining a child because they wouldn't look at them in the eye. And I had to explain to her that culture would never do that. And it wasn't a sign of disrespect. It was actually being more respectful. And so growing your teachers and your community to understand each other's differences. Different isn't bad. Different is wonderful, and that we need to be tolerant of one another and embrace that uniqueness. So it does take practice though. For some people that does not come naturally. And so you have to be intentional in the work. And so some of that is in the celebrations and celebrating the histories and the accomplishments of others and being open to it and being willing to listen. And again, have the children have that voice.
Fourth question. Earlier this year, a group of 6th grade students requested that we hang a Black Lives Matter flag in our school. After placing the flag next to our school's pride flag, an Instagram post went viral and a vocal group of individuals took issue with both flags. The school and administrators were targeted by this group demanding that we remove the flags. How would you have advised the administrators and district to handle the situation?
Okay, that was tricky because it is about recognizing all students, right, and all their viewpoints and everything, but it's also about teaching tolerance one for another. I know with the pride flag and especially the BLM flag that was going around, some people were like, but all children's lives matter. Well, yes, that's true. But at the moment, the narrative was about the children of the Black community because of what was going on in the nation at that time. It's just like when Boston got bombed in Las Vegas, we said Boston strong, Las Vegas strong. We didn't go, but wait. Salt Lake is just as strong, or, Richmond is just as strong. No, it's about recognizing the narrative at the time and listening to what their concerns are and their aches are. And with the pride flag, it's an ongoing issue with them and wanting to be heard and be recognized. So the advice that I would give the school administrators is, let's make sure that we're celebrating and recognizing everyone at the time that needs to be recognized, but also being strong enough to recognize those in need at the time. Who was the narrative about at this time? And at that time, it was about the Black Lives Movement and what they were going through and drawing our attention to it. And so, to have those parameters in place, but also making sure that we're recognizing other communities, that other people aren't being negated. I know that it's a very hot topic, a very political topic, and a lot of people don't agree with that one way or the other, especially when it came back. Everybody matters. Yes, there's no denying that every child matters. But if we really say that and we believe it, then we need to act it. And it's okay to step back and recognize different groups at different times. And it's okay to still recognize everyone. So I think we have to be a little bit more flexible in our acceptance of other issues and what's going on and being open to them. Again, it goes back to the lens of our perspective and the voices and recognizing everyone at different times. And it's okay to do that.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez. And just letting you know, we have about another 25 minutes. So we're doing great on time. So good job.
Okay, I'll talk.
The fifth question, why are you interested in Salt Lake City and why are you the right fit?
Okay. Well, like I said earlier in my introduction, I have been looking for jobs, like I said, to either put me closer to one side of the children or the other side of the children, because I have two in both locations. And so when this opened up, I did look at it, and I have researched a lot of the challenges that you're having here. And it's not too different from other school divisions, but some things are a little bit more hyper-focused than others. But the one thing that whenever I look for a job, I just have to be honest, I go and I look at the diversity makeup. And when I saw the level of diversity here, my family's diverse. So when I saw the diversity, it very much interested me. Since I'd already been a superintendent, I felt like, okay, I can move I definitely wanted a larger district. And like I said earlier, I realized that I'd like to be closer to bigger populations with the resources, and the diversity really drew me here. So then, of course, with my children being here and grandchildren, I was like, okay, this could be home for me, and I can really fit in, and I have something to give. The other thing is with the diversity, I love those challenges of meeting the needs of diverse communities. Is it harder? Yes, because you have people at different levels of safety within the United States, depending on their situation. You have people at different levels of their English learning. You have different levels of literacy within their own language. But that's what I've done in my prior experiences. That's what I've done. When I was at Meadowbrook High School, we had it became one of the ESOL or L sites in our division, and more were moving into the community. And of course, I was just eating that up since I could speak Spanish too. But then we noticed that it wasn't so much, there was definitely an achievement gap, but there was a literacy gap in their own learning. So we devised a native Spanish speaking course. And that was twofold. One was to allow them to get more literate in their own language so that it would support their English language learning and complement it. But it was also to open the door to opportunities. We didn't want the Latino population to be marginalized and not be able to be in AP or IB classes. And so by that, after the 3 years of their native Spanish speaking, which was taught by a native Spanish speaker, they were able to go into AP literature. And we wanted that. We wanted them to take the time to read and learn about the great writers from their own culture and what they had to say, and to have those experiences, and then also sit in IB programs. When I was at Meadowbrook, we started the IB program there, so I was a part of that from the ground up. So I've taught AP and IB kids, but also it was about helping the other children who are learning the language. How do they also get to participate in these more rigorous classes? So what we did is we really focused on a collaboration model that allowed them to enter the general education classes more readily. And we focused on vocabulary building, complemented with literacy in their own language, with a pathway to higher rigorous classes. And in the IB program, there were 2 schools in Chesterfield County that had the IB program. Our philosophy at our school, because we were so diverse, we were a majority minority school, like I said, we allowed children to sit in IB and AP classes who even weren't going to take the test. They weren't diploma seekers. We felt like it was important to have kids take a swing at bat, to at least have the bat in their hands. And so we saw great growth in our students who had that level of exposure. And so I feel like that would make me a great fit here as well, because I've had those experiences of trying to champion for the underdog, like, no, you too get to do this too. We're going to help you do this. And the other things we did too is because of our community was becoming predominantly looking more like urban setting in Richmond City, because we were right beside the Richmond City boundary. So we had a lot of that population there. We worked on an initiative there when I was then the school improvement coach of remediation intervention period built in school day, because our children had to either go to work or they had to go home and take care of younger siblings. You know, their commitments to their families were distracting them from their school day. So we devised, before it became the norm, this was, back a few years, okay, when, won't give away how many, right, is about how to do the intervention. So we built it in the school day. And we were able to see so many percentage points gains from our L students because they got the help they needed, because their families didn't have the resources to do it. They didn't understand the education system, and plus they were working most of the time. So when we built it in the school day, and we also implemented, so we did 3 big initiatives. We did the intervention time, which was called self-directed study time. So students who were being successful, that's why it's called self-directed, they got to choose to go do something else. If you wanted to go back in the art room, you wanted to go back in the band room, and you wanted, it's almost like a reward system. You're achieving and you're meeting the benchmarks, but for those who needed the help, you got more help during the school day, because if you did it after school, the very children you needed in the buildings weren't going to be sticking around. So we had to build it in. The other thing we did is we looked at grading, the Power of I. This was all part of the High Schools at Work initiatives. But the Power of I, a lot of our students, getting a 0 was the easy way out. And we said, how can we do this differently? Failing is not an option. Truly, it's not an option. So how do we do that? So the Power of I became the incomplete. you got it incomplete. You got it not yet. You didn't get to just, oh, get a 0 and get out of here. And so we built in that remediation time, a time where they could redo assignments, go back and get more help. They had to prove it. They had to show it. They had to assess for it. We didn't let them out. So that made it stronger, and we saw greater percentage points there. Complement that with, back in the day before it became the norm as well, professional learning communities, the DeFore model, and getting everyone to line up, do vertical alignment and horizontal alignment, and getting everybody on the same page. And for a while there, the teachers were like, oh my gosh, these are such big initiatives. And my biggest critic at the time actually came back at the end of the year and said, oh my gosh, I see how we had to do all 3 at once. You couldn't do them individually because they're so interwoven. And so navigating just the how to get them there. And so that really was my love of doing the school improvement and helping every child succeed. And so in Salt Lake City, there are so many good things you do. Like, I was so amazed when I was doing my research of all the many things you do and the different modalities you use to reach students and the different opportunities and things like that. But I also looked at, when you peel back the layers, what are some of our minority groups? How are they doing? And when I was studying the trend data for over 6 years, the gap is still there, 30 to 40% gap. And that's unfortunate, but that's kind of what I'm good at, and that I've done that in other divisions. You peel back the layers of the onion in the disaggregate, because when you look at the aggregate, we're very pleased at all the accomplishments we've done in the other divisions, but you got to have those courageous conversations and say, hey, what did I not do? What are we not getting done? And that's the thing. It's okay to where you're at now, but where do you want to be? And when you peel back the layers, when we say it's education for all students, do we really mean all? Are we going to put our money where our mouth is? Are we really going to do it? If we look at our course selections, are we spending more money on elite electives that high flyers are succeeding at? And maybe when you break it down, you're not spending as much money like on the gatekeeper classes, like English 9, your freshman English, or your Algebra 1, because all students have to take it. But if you really break down and do the data analysis, are you spending equitably at that level? So you start looking at the equity things along the division, and I feel like I've worked at that too in my other divisions, is how do you make it equitable for all students? So you have to look at the finances, you have to look at the resources, you have to look at teacher capacity, because it all becomes about the instructional core. So while we worked on that, I want to digress just a little bit to the alternative school that I was at as well. When you focus on really empowering students of diverse backgrounds and social emotional learning, and let's, after this pandemic, the one thing our children are really suffering in is now their mental health, their mental wellness and health and social emotional learning, and trying to get those pieces in place. So again, it comes back to building that cultural competency, but also disciplining and make sure, are we reacting a certain way to children, the way that they present themselves, as opposed to the way other children present themselves. So again, working in that community and trying to get them on board with the tiered support systems and the PBIS models, and also getting a student active action team together. Like, what resources do you need to pull together? And you all in Salt Lake have great communities with a lot of support that I was reading about. So I have had experience with all that, as well as working with our community agencies to help. When I got to Page, actually, they didn't have that in place. And we had one group that we really worked close with about, not using drugs and things like that, and alcohol. That's really still a great partner of ours. But I worked hard to build a relationship within the community of how can we be a community action team to meet the resources. And while there's a lot of impoverished families up in Page, it really came down to, who do you start with? Let me volunteer my students' families. And so we started there. So you have to start somewhere. So we started meeting and pulling all our resources together to get, the medical and the jobs and the food and the clothing. And so we just said, start using our families. Let's start there. We'll have a big impact in the county by doing that. And also, having those experiences, even though it's not quite as diverse in Page now, it's a lot of socioeconomic diversity there, but just being supportive and understanding all the different elements that you guys are doing and what's working. But also, I'm a data gal. I'm a visionary. I'm also, but I don't want to say change agent. I used to say I was a change agent, and I still am, but people shake at that. They're like, change, don't come in here and change everything. That's not what it's about. It's about using data to inform decisions. It's not data driven. I know that's the old word, data driven. Data doesn't drive anything unless the people at the table take action on it. So it's about being data informed, and I'm a data informed person. I want to see the data. Don't give me all the anecdotes. Let me see the numbers. Let's peel it back. Let's disaggregate it. Are we spending the same amount of money? Like I gave that example in those courses. Do all our children have the same access? And with all the diversity here, that's where we have to look at, because if you want to move forward with all the great things we're doing now, notice I said, we, look at that, I'm just being presumptuous, aren't I? All the good things that are happening in Salt Lake. You also want to look, how can we get better? So you set the bar, but you want to reach it higher. And that should never be good enough. You know, you always want to move it, because kids, you want to move them along. So you want to expose your children who are lower achievers, give them hope, and let them know that they can make it. And so one of the things that I focused on in my career is protecting the instructional core. So even when I was a school administrator, central office administrator, protect the instructional core. So I've worked hard to get the support systems in place. And so what does that entail? That entails having a focus on building a culture and climate with the processes and procedures and structures in place to build an aligned system to protect the instructional core. And when you talk about what the goals are of the instructional core, you talk about student achievement for all learners, raising the bar, even the high flyers. When in Virginia, we have advanced proficiency and proficient, and we have these benchmarks. But even at our high flyer schools, I would look at it and go, okay, but why are we still not increasing the advanced proficiency if you have all these A's? Why isn't everybody getting advanced proficiency? So you challenge everyone's narrative to make them become the best version of themselves. But then you also look at in closing the achievement gap, again, doing that and graduating students who are ready for their tomorrow, whatever that tomorrow is. Not everyone's going to go to college, but you give everyone the opportunity to have rigorous coursework. And then you get them ready for the military career. Our job is to prepare them so they have choices. We don't determine their path, but we allow them to have choices in their path. And so when you look at that instructional core, what are the three main components that I feel like that I've really worked at is building teacher capacity, building their knowledge and strength. That's one component. And with that, you have to increase the rigor and relevance for the children. You have to expose them to rigor. I had a teacher, oh my goodness, she was so rigorous. The kids would come flying to me, please get me out of her class, please get me out of her class. But she was so rigorous with them that at the end of the day, and this was at the alternative school, these are at-risk kids who couldn't get a flying leap before about hanging in there. But because they used to complain, I do more writing in this class than I do my English class. And I was like, yes, good job. And at the end of the day, her room would be full. They'd never go to lunch. They'd all hang with her and everything. And so building those teachers up to have that kind of capacity and make that kind of impact on children who had no reason to want to write an essay at all, to get them there. And then you complement it with the third component. So you're building teacher capacity and efficacy and supporting them. Then you're building the rigor of the academic experience of our children, and you're making it engaged. When you have children who are engaged, they don't even know they're learning. And I don't mean worksheet, like actively engaged in worksheets, okay? But it's actually about making it relevant to their lives. They don't care what Y equals. You know, you got to make them understand, why do they care what Y equals or what X equals. In Charles City, we did a summer school and we had to mandate it. That wasn't very popular, but we had to mandate it 1 year to get kids there. But we went at it through project-based learning. How can we make it fun to focus on literacy and numeracy, and they won't even know they're doing it. So when you pull out matchbox cards and you're running them down and taking measurements, mathematical measurements, and making hypotheses about how far they're going to go. And then when you do the water thing with the alligators, I mean, the kids, the biggest compliment we had, and you know this is something when the bus drivers tell you, oh my goodness, these kids are so excited to come to school. What are you all doing there? We knew we had hit the nail on the head as far as engaging the kids. So I just feel like with all that, those experiences that I bring to the table, I feel like it will complement all the good work going there, but I'll also be able to peel back the layers so we can even look deeper to take it to that next level and truly be about closing the achievement gaps that we have in minority groups in the community.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez. We have just a little bit over 10 minutes left. And the final question is actually for any questions you have for people around the table.
Very good. So I would like to ask you all, in Page, with the pandemic, we had internet issues and accessibility issues when you're up in the mountains, which, okay, if you all to see our mountains, you're probably call them hills, but doesn't compare to the Rockies. All right, Blue Ridge Mountains, but they are mountains to us nonetheless. But there's been some accessibility issues and equitable issues that way. So some of the models we had to choose was really based on our ability to get, devices and internet access. How have you all been able to ensure that everyone has that access with either hotspots or Wi-Fi extensions? Do you feel like you've been able to get that out to all your communities in the area?
Okay, let Sam do it.
So
devices have been available, hotspots have been available. The foundation, our education foundation, did a great job of partnering with Xfinity, Comcast to get free internet essentials as options for kids. Where the rubber hit the road for my school, and I'm guessing a lot of schools, is we were taking a device and giving it to a family who had never connected to the internet,
Right.
who had never had a computer in their home. So there was an awful lot of hand-to-hand combat and home visits all through the summer, in the spring, through the summer, and through the fall. I put one of my teachers, half of his contract was for home visits, and he's gone on close to 400 home visits
Oh, excellent.
this year. And he's our in-person tech guy. He's got the expertise to do it, but it took that level of personal connection with families in order to try to make it as equitable as possible.
Yeah. Do you feel like in your community now, I know there was because I've been reading the newspaper, a lot of people wanted children to come back and everything. For a lot of our communities, the schools are the daycares and the connection for a lot of families and things like that. How do you feel like your staff is? Because I know you all just came back this last week, February 8th, right? At the high school level for sure that they came back. How do you feel like your staff is responding to that?
I'd say the thing that I keep hearing the most from friends and staff members is that the buildup to coming back was really hard, and they saw a lot of barriers. We removed a lot of those barriers, and a week after school started, they were so happy to be back and to be in front of kids with the students that they've worked with all year, and now they get to see face to face. I think that's been a huge change in perception of what they thought it would be and what it really is.
I know I toured one of your schools this morning, Meadowlark, and it looks very similar to other schools and our schools, with our mitigation strategies in place, just like you all have and everything. And it was the same experience for our teachers to be back. They want to be in front of the children, but they want to be safe. Do you feel like that for in the upcoming year that your community is going to embrace still using some remote learning and some of the virtual learning to complement the in-person learning?
I hope so. I was gonna just add one piece to the elementary, since I'm elementary.
Yes.
My teachers are great. They've been so great not to complain. I mean, they're honest.
Yes.
They're tired.
Yes.
And they're honest. But what we've noticed in our littles, like the kindergarten and first grade and second grade, is our teachers are live streaming, which is difficult. They've got their remote learning kids on while their kids are in person. And we're essentially talking about a group of kindergartners that's never been to school.
Right.
So they're learning how to be in school, and the teachers doing both. First graders are relearning because they left kindergarten when they were, so that has been an added demand for the lower grade teachers. I think they're more tired than everyone else.
Yeah.
And just, teacher, my computer gets shut down, and then you've got to juggle the Zoom kids and the other kids in your classroom. But every day they feel more capable, and we've taken some parapros and hired some extra parapros to put in there.
Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, I saw that.
Kind of
this
tried
morning.
to reach that. But I would say, like, moving forward next year, I hope we continue to have the remote option, but please don't make our teachers live stream their instruction. Let's have a separate online school.
Well, that's good that you said that, because I was wondering, because I know that I'm an outside the box kind of thinker. I'll look at any idea like, yeah, let's try that, So one thing is the possibility, especially in a division this large, I would imagine that you guys could handle it more, to have virtual only teachers who do it for the school division, almost make like a virtual school from K through 8-12.
Yes.
Is it because the balancing act between the remote and the synchronous learning, and oh my goodness, I can only imagine. And our teachers having to do jump drives and paper packets, and it's a lot of fun. But I would think that would help our teachers to be able to just only have that level of responsibility and then get really good at that craft. Virtual teaching is a little bit different from in-person teaching, and it's trying not to split yourself. So do you guys feel like that is a possibility for Salt Lake City, to be able to have like a virtual academy and just have teachers who you hire, like they apply to be the online teacher, so you have the rock stars being your online teachers and not having to manage both? Think there's room for that?
I think there's room for that. I know at our high school, we plan to continue to offer a remote-only option in the future. It's been really helpful for a lot of our students, especially like our young parents who would have missed school for like a maternity leave, who are able to just attend school, straight through all of that. And we also have a lot of students who, when school shut down in the spring, took on daytime jobs to help their families, especially because a lot of adults were losing their jobs. And so now they're able to continue those jobs and still attend school in the evenings, even though we don't have like an evening school option, because they can do asynchronous work. So we're very committed to continuing that, and maybe also adapting to sort of like a blended model for our students who attend in person but have attendance issues.
Excellent. Sounds a lot like what we did at the alternative high school. You have to make, we had night school to help our students who were out on maternity leave and things like that, attending to everything. So what are the, what are you guys looking for in a superintendent? I saw the survey. I saw that was out there. I know you do site-based management here. Not every division does that, as well, you know. Is that what you want to cling to and make sure that we continue with that as we go forward and have that flexibility? And then what supports are you looking for from central office to help you do your work? You see how I gave you all the multi-layered questions?
Yes.
You see how I did that?
That's
Yeah.
The site-based leadership is super important, and I love the way that we do it in Salt Lake. With you get the chance to spend some time with Larry,
Yes.
and I helped open. He's probably talked to about Slixie a little bit.
Yes.
I helped open the original Slixie with him 13 years ago, and then he was my principal. I was his assistant principal last year.
Okay.
The way that he connects with people and how real he is just so refreshing and so needed. And I've seen kind of a change in the culture in our district among leaders, where it feels to me like we feel more supported, and that opens us up to collaborate more and to make better connections in this community.
Well, that leads me, I know you didn't answer the rest of the question, but now I want to digress to that. I'll watch my time here. But that really comes down to psychological safety and felt accountability, where everyone feels responsible and that ownership, and so you guys want to continue to have that. But I'm a big believer in psychological safety. So I'm one of those that if I ask your opinion, I truly want it, but I want you all to feel safe enough to be able to say it to me. One thing is I don't take anything personally, but I want those courageous conversations. But we also need to make sure that culture is there so people feel safe to have that, but also to that they're good listeners too, that at the end of the day, we look at both sides. We're both recognizing what's on each side of the table, but then we come to consensus, but what's the best thing for our kids? You know, at the end of the day, it has to be, is it good for kids? Is it educationally sound? And is it financially responsible and sustainable? And then if we're basing it on those decisions, whether you do it at your sites or you do it at a district level, that we're able to do that. Do you feel like that you have more of that psychological safety now and you want to continue with that to be able to have those open and courageous conversations and supportedness?
Yes, please.
Okay, and that's how I operate. So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And you'll see that I'm very collaborative. So even when I go into schools, I'll ask the kids. We started Lexia was new in Page because we had it in Charles City. You know how it is. Sometimes you bring some things with you. So, but I wouldn't ask the children, you know, what do you think about this? And then I'd ask the teachers, what do you think about this? And then I also had a student advisory committee because I wanted to know firsthand. No offense to teachers, but it was like, do you like the grading practices? This is what we're thinking about doing. What do you think about it? And what's not working for you? What's the bullying like? What's your mental health? You know, what do you need but to have that voice? And so at some point you guys might get a little crazy with me in the sense because I do want to know. I want the full. And the other thing I believe too is knowledge is power. Again, we might not all agree at the end of the day, but at some point a decision has to be made, right? But if you explain it as to the why, that's when you bring people along. Like people are okay that it's not their way, but they want to have a full understanding and analysis really of the data and the evidence as to why we're going this direction. And then we can go forward. The one thing, like when I did my interview with the board earlier, the one thing that I live by is I want diversity in discussion, but we have to have unity in command or unity in decision making. Like when we decide something, then there's no more throwing each other under the bus. No more. I don't even want that in the first place, but no rolling of the eyes, no throwing each other in the bus. That we're united in what we said, even if it wasn't our baby, you know, even if we had to come on board and be convinced, but we're all going to see it through to the end and be supportive of one another. I feel like that's the only way you can. We don't need toxic environments. We all need to be working and being on the same page, but still respect the diverse thinking and the diverse discussions and open to trying new things and being okay to say that didn't work. That's okay. It's okay to step away. And again, that psychological safety and that accountability and level of ownership. Very good. Well, I'm excited. It seems like there's a lot of good things going on here. What else do I need to know as I walk in? Again, reading the newspaper, so I kind of know what some of the push button issues are in the community. What else do I need to know as an incoming superintendent that if I was so selected for the job that you feel like I would need to be prepared for?
I'm gonna speak out. I feel like equity isn't centered in our district, that we have really good policies, but we don't operationalize them. It's
Okay.
not centered in everything,
Okay.
and it needs to be centered in everything. And I think that's one of the reasons our access and opportunity and achievement gap persists, is we aren't making those courageous moves to
Yeah.
really talk honestly about what the barriers are and remove them. And also, we tend to be pretty deficit based, we need to be assets based and look at funds of knowledge. So I'm really looking for that in a future leader.
Well, when you look at equity, that's one of the things you need to look at are your assets. Who has what talents and skills and things to bring to the table, and also looking at, and you got to be brave enough to do an equity audit. And a lot of people talk they want equity until they feel like it's going to be taking something away from a different group of students. And it's got to be about all students or it's not. And the thing with the vision about equity and excellence, every school, every day, every classroom, every day, you can't, or you should not have excellence without equity. You can't have equity without excellence. You can't have excellence for some and then be professing that it's about equity when some of the children still aren't being successful and don't have the access. So that's one thing I'm good at as far as just, having those courageous conversations. And then you have to massage those relationships. Some people are going to have hurt feelings because it's going to feel like you're taking away, if there's a west side, east side, north side. I know there's east side, west side around here. It's north and south where I'm from. So, and to be able to say, it's okay, they're still going to have, but we need to take care of these children too. And so we all need to be on Team Salt Lake. And we have to be committed to Team Salt Lake, not team parts of Salt Lake or team some of Salt Lake, and to go forward in that. I've done that in other divisions and I feel like I can be an asset there as long as we have that psychological safety and accountability together, united in the cause. And that is where I'm a big cheerleader. So I can rally.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez. We are at our time limit, so I really appreciate you and I appreciate everybody around the table. Thank you all for your participation. And if there's, some people had submitted questions towards the end in the chat. For those that did not get their questions asked, I would strongly encourage you to join the community forum this evening, where you will have an opportunity to submit those questions as well. So thank you everybody for your time. Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez, and enjoy the rest of your day in Salt Lake.
Thank you. Appreciate it.